On day one of Starmer's tenure, there is something to celebrate because his appointments to the cabinet are, quite frankly, earth shattering. He is doing something. Yes, we've seen people put in the Lords in order to enter politics because you've got to be in the House of Parliament in order to be a minister. But I don't think we've ever really seen independent experts pulled into the cabinet effectively off the street who are not committed, as far as we know, to Labour, who are committed to getting something done. And that's really the case of James Timpson, who's part of the Timpsons organisation, the people who cut keys, who mend shoes. And I'll come to him in a minute. But there are three people who are appointed into the cabinet who need to be noted. The one who's received the attention is Patrick Vallance, because people know of him, because he's the science officer who was standing at the podium with Boris Johnson, and that should tell you something about independence. Then James Timpson, he's the CEO of Timpson's, the key cutting people. And then Richard Hermer, who is a lawyer of quite extraordinary significance. And these three people mark a significant shift. I don't know why I'm saying the word significant so often. They mark a significant shift in the approach to governance by Keir Starmer. It parallels Rishi Sunak's controversial appointment of David Cameron. It parallels Boris Johnson's shift of Zach Goldsmith into the House of Lords. But it diverges with a notable exception and emphasis on non-partisan expertise and integrity, and this has long been necessary. It's something which is done in the United States. Now, Keir Starmer has introduced it here, and it's such an important introduction. Patrick Vallance, known for his role in guiding the policy during COVID, brings valuable knowledge to the forefront of science and innovation. There aren't enough scientists going into Parliament, into the House of Commons, so bring them in. Bring them in. James Timpson, the CEO of Timpson's, he's a visionary individual in prison reform and rehabilitation, employing former offenders in his shops, giving them a vocation, giving them a focus, reflecting his long-standing commitment to these causes. And he is there, the modern-day Elizabeth Fry, talking about rehabilitation, talking about reform, talking about the inadequate nature of our prison system at the moment. And I would have thought, the other person who should be in on this is Rory Stewart. Absolutely another person who is committed. He was the prison minister and he understood it. I think he got it. And I think James Timpson will get it. Somebody who is committed to genuine reform rather than a sticking plaster. Richard Hermer, a distinguished barrister in his own right. These people are set to enhance the application of integrity to ministerial office, as opposed to the Bravermans, the Jenricks, the Cleverleys, the Raabs. Raab, unable to fix the human rights law which the Conservatives wanted. All he did was sun himself on the beach while Kabul fell. What an utterly incapacitated individual. Appointed, just over. Thank God it's over. Thank God. Thank God. Elevated to a position that he could not, that he was incapable of dealing with. I'm incapable of actually expressing the idea. I'm so wound up about the Raab nonsense. Therese Kofi, another incompetent, who mirrors the sewage that was generated and discharged into the rivers and the seas during her tenure. Lucy Fraser, Michelle Donnellan, utter incompetence. And then Nadine Dorries, like a candle on the cake, guttering in insignificance and incapacity. And yet these people were significant because these were the people we turned to ensure that the jobs get done, and they are sitting pretty in something that is effectively a sinecure. Starmer's strategy, in contrast, appears to transcend traditional party politics, focusing instead on the practical application of skill and exercise. And this approach moves away from the perceived cronyism, the inefficiency, the ineffectiveness associated with the recent Conservative ministers, such as Dominic Raab and Nadine Dorries. It's extraordinary I've said them in the same sentence. Instead of rewarding loyalty, Starmer aims to bring in individuals who can address the critical issues with competence and dedication, steering away from the sticking plaster politics, what he calls the sticking plaster politics. This is a commendable effort to ensure the government's actions are rooted in genuine skill, genuine integrity. It's no good just standing on the steps of Number 10 and talking about integrity as Rishi Sunak did. This is a demonstration by somebody who is actually going to bring integrity. These people are not Labour ministers. They're truly detached. They are invited into the government to do a job that needs doing, to apply integrity to the law. Such a contrast to Suella Braverman, who was appointed as a crony, not to give advice when she was Attorney General, not to give advice on whether something is lawful, but instead to make it lawful by changing the law, by manipulating events. There's no integrity there. That's the integrity of a butcher, and there I do a disservice to butchers. Butchers would have more integrity than Suella Braverman. And Suella Braverman is thinking about becoming the leader of the Conservative Party. She couldn't lead an egg. And this is the long list of hopeless Conservative ministers, incompetent and ineffective. And, as I say, I think it's summed up with Boris appointing Suella Braverman to rubber stamp the laws that he wanted, rather than to approve something, rather than to give advice about whether or not something is genuinely legal. She doesn't do the work. She didn't do the work. She was constantly paper flicking. And had she turned up to one of my seminars and flicked through her files as she did in a committee room, I would have sent her out to go and do her work. I would have sent her back out into the corridor. And I thought I was mild-mannered when I was dealing with students, and no student would have come into my classes so unprepared. I would have laughed at them. I would have laughed with them. I would have got them to laugh at their incompetence, and then told them to go off and come back the following day. And I would have made time for them the following day. I don't know whether I would ever have made time for Suella Braverman. She's a professional. It's a disgrace that she didn't master her brief before she actually came into the committee room. An utter disgrace. But she wasn't the only one, so it looked common. It looked like this was something that ministers did. It's not something that any real minister does. This is incompetence. And it went all the way through the Culture Committee as well. All the way through. The only person who was actually prepared was Nicholson, who was asking questions. I take my hat off to Keir Starmer for this, and he has a lot more license than I would have been inclined to give him, simply because of this gesture, which is remarkable, and he's building on what he's seen in Parliament. He's learnt from Cameron, he's learnt from Boris, and he's learnt from Sunak. Don't suppose he's learnt anything from Liz Truss, except what not to do. Look at Liz Truss and do the opposite.